The micronutrient test offers a handful of unique markers that are great advantages for you in working with your patients. I want to take the time to go through each one of these unique markers and help provide some insight into what they are truly telling you about the health of your patient, and then also how to take this information and provide recommendations for the patient. Of all of these unique markers, I think the one that is probably the most unique of all of them is going to be fructose sensitivity. Let me do a few things when I'm talking about fructose sensitivity. Let's start off by talking about what fructose sensitivity is not. This is not a fructose intolerance. A fructose intolerance is a digestive issue. This is a biochemical issue that we're talking about here. This is at a cellular level. This is not taking place in the gastrointestinal tract. This is looking at things in regards to energy production. More specifically, when we look at this fructose sensitivity, what we are actually looking at is an insensitivity, not truly a sensitivity. When we see that the fructose sensitivity marker is dropping on the test, what it is really indicating is that this is an individual who is no longer able to take fructose and efficiently utilize that as an energy source. Here's what happens. Normally when we consume fructose is going to be mobilized to the liver, and in the liver it's going to begin the breakdown process to ultimately be allowed to convert to a substrate that can move into the Krebs cycle and then go on to lead to ATP production. When individuals have a fructose sensitivity, meaning that they have overconsumed fructose for their metabolic needs, what is happening here is that this is an individual that is taking fructose, and rather than it going the direction of the Krebs cycle, it's in turn going towards triglyceride production. The more fructose someone consumes, there is an enzyme known as aldolase in this process that is a rate-limiting enzyme. Aldolase can only process so much fructose in a given period. When we consume beyond what that enzyme can handle, we begin to see the transition towards greater triglyceride production. You may see that this often correlates if you're looking at a lipid panel. You would see that there would be an elevation in the triglycerides, oftentimes above 100 on the lipid panel. And just as a side note, if you see this on the micronutrient, you might also look for a copper deficiency here as well. Many times fructose insensitivities and copper deficiencies go hand in hand. Now, when you see this is a different type of marker from many of the other analytes that present in the micronutrient report. For example, if we see a glutamine deficiency, we know we need to replace glutamine. Or if we see a zinc deficiency, we know zinc needs to be restored in that individual. But what about fructose? We're saying that fructose, this individual's already consumed too much fructose, so we're certainly not going to give them more. Well, rather than looking at this particular marker and thinking about the therapeutic as an addition, in this case, we're looking at an omission. We're eliminating the problematic factor. For fructose sensitivity, it's fructose. So you may look at that and think, well, this is an individual that would be consuming fructose from fruits in the diet. We've all made the recommendation to someone to consume more vegetables and plants and herbs and spices and fruits in the diet. And the reality is all that individual heard was, I'm going to consume fruits because that's what tastes sweet. That's what has the most acuity or most stimulation to my taste buds. So that's what they tend to gravitate towards at the expense of consuming items that have lesser amounts of fructose or even no fructose in them. The problem here is that when you overconsume that fruit, because the predominant sugar in there is fructose, you start overwhelming this pathway and creating a fructose insensitivity. But fructose in fruit is by no means the only culprit here. You may quickly recognize that high fructose corn syrup is another factor in this, but there's some that tend to slip through the cracks with individuals that we want to make sure that we don't overlook. These are going to be honey, agave, maple syrup, molasses, and alcohol. These are often thought about as natural sweeteners. Individuals may consume these in abundance without recognizing the implications that they're having in regards to limiting their ATP production because they can't take that fructose efficiently as an energy substrate and move it into the Krebs cycle. So when you see this, you need to start thinking that if I have a borderline deficiency on fructose insensitivity, that I'm going to have that individual eliminate all fructose sources for 2 months. And if there's a functional deficiency in fructose sensitivity, that individual needs to eliminate all fructose sources for 4 months. We try to get, it doesn't matter whether this is a low glycemic or high glycemic, we want all these fructose sources out of the diet and have that individual focusing more on glucose producing, either glucose directly or glucose producing sugars, carbohydrates in the diet to meet their needs for carbohydrate intake. So, marker of omission, but a very unique marker that's going to allow you to make not necessarily a micronutrient recommendation, but it's going to allow you to make a macronutrient recommendation. And one final point on this is that understand that allowing this fructose sensitivity to go on unaddressed, if those triglycerides begin to increase in number, that individual is more predisposed to dysglycemia, which has its own unique pattern that we're going to review, or maybe also stated as insulin resistance. So with that in mind, here's your first unique marker on the micronutrient test.